They laughed like I was a joke. I sat at the far end of the table, smiling quietly while my cousin Tamara mocked my tiny apartment, and Uncle Raymond cracked another, "she can't even afford a house" joke. My brother Trevor joined in, like always. Plates clinked, wine flowed, and their laughter grew louder, at my expense. I could have said nothing. I almost did. But then I looked up, met every eye in that room, and said it. "I own the building you all live in." The room went silent. For once, I wasn't invisible. And they were stunned. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping family drama, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story where the underdog wins big. And don't forget to comment "silent power" if you've ever been underestimated. Let's show the world what quiet strength really looks like. Now, let's begin. I wasn't born the favorite. Not even close. In the Miles family, it was always loud voices, big personalities, and even bigger egos. And me? I was the quiet one. The one no one noticed unless something needed cleaning or someone needed blame. I used to think being invisible was a curse, but now I know it was my shield. Growing up, family events felt like auditions. Trevor, my older brother, would show off his medals, his perfect grades, his smooth speeches. Everyone clapped like he was royalty. "That's my boy," Uncle Raymond would boom. Tamara, our cousin, was always camera ready, even as a kid. She danced, sang, bragged, twirled in her glittery dresses. Everyone adored her. "That girl's going places," they'd say. And me? "Where's Elena?" "Oh, there she is, quiet as always." That was my label. Quiet Elena. The girl who read books at the table and got asked to help Grandma with the dishes, while the others basked in applause. It didn't bother me at first. I liked being close to Grandma Bernice in the kitchen. She was the only one who spoke to me like I mattered. She'd gently pat my hand and say, "The ones who move in silence usually move the farthest." I didn't fully understand what she meant then, but I never forgot it. At school, I wasn't top of my class. I wasn't popular or athletic. But I listened. I watched, and I learned. I saw how people treated each other when no one was looking. I saw how my brother would smile in public and roll his eyes at Mom behind closed doors. I saw how Tamara lied about scholarships she didn't win. I saw it all, and I stayed quiet. Over time, I started to notice a pattern. The louder people were, the less they actually had. Uncle Raymond, for instance, always bragged about money, cars, investments, but I overheard him once whispering to Grandma about mortgage payments and credit card debt. Tamara had all these brand-name bags, but I found out she borrowed them for photo shoots and returned them the next day. Meanwhile, I kept working, kept saving, kept reading about things no one in my family ever talked about, like compound interest, passive income, and ownership. But back then, they only saw what they wanted to see. At one family barbecue, I wore sneakers and a plain shirt. Tamara showed up in designer heels and fake lashes that looked like butterfly wings. She laughed when I took the bus to the party. "Oh, Elena," she said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "we need to get you out of the Stone Age." I just smiled and helped Grandma set the table. That same night, Uncle Raymond pulled me aside. "You ever thought about doing something with your life?" he asked, holding his glass of whiskey like it was a trophy. "You're not getting any younger, you know. No man's gonna wait around forever." I bit my tongue. I wanted to ask him why being useful or independent wasn't enough, why being quiet made me lesser. But I didn't. I just nodded like always and slipped back into the kitchen. And Mom? She tried. She really did. She'd defend me sometimes, but she always got drowned out. "Elena's just taking her time," she'd say softly. But no one listened. She was just as invisible in that family as I was. Maybe that's why we understood each other without saying much. I remember one Thanksgiving. Everyone went around the table sharing their big wins. Trevor had just closed a major deal. Tamara hit 50K followers on some platform. Even the twins were praised for winning a dance contest. When it got to me, I said I was learning coding online and working part-time from home. Silence. Then a few fake smiles, a pity chuckle. "Still finding your way, huh?" Uncle Raymond said. "Don't worry," Tamara added. "We all bloom eventually." That was the moment I realized. No matter what I did, they had already decided who I was, so I let them believe it. I stayed in the background. I let them laugh, assume, and look down on me. Because while they were busy performing for each other, I was laying the bricks, something they'd never see coming. And by the time they did, it would already be too late. If there was one thing the Miles family loved more than food, it was showing off. Every gathering turned into a competition. Cars, vacations, houses, watches, even how much someone's dog cost. And I was always the one with nothing to show, at least nothing they cared about. One Christmas in particular stuck with me. It was hosted at Uncle Raymond's oversized house with marble floors and giant gold-framed photos of himself everywhere. Tamara arrived in a fur coat, live streaming her entrance like she was walking a red carpet. Trevor pulled up in a sleek new BMW, revving the engine twice before stepping out with his sunglasses still on. At night, I walked in with a simple tote bag and a wrapped gift I made myself. It was a handmade memory book for Grandma Bernice. I spent weeks designing it, adding old family photos, writing captions in neat handwriting, even including newspaper clippings of Grandpa's achievements. When I handed it to her, she smiled so wide I thought she might cry. But then Tamara interrupted with, "Aw, you brought Grandma a scrapbook. That's cute." The way she said it, like it was a kindergarten craft, made my stomach twist. Trevor laughed. "Elena's still living that Pinterest life, huh?" Everyone else smiled politely, then went back to talking about cruises and Rolexes. Grandma squeezed my hand, whispering, "Ignore them. This is real love." But still, the room made it clear I didn't belong. What they didn't know was that I was struggling. Really struggling. My apartment was a tiny studio above a noisy street. The radiator barely worked. I shared walls with a guy who played the drums at 2 a.m. And my job? I was juggling 2 freelance gigs and tutoring part-time just to make rent. Some days, I skipped meals just to pay for Wi-Fi. I wasn't proud of it, but I was determined. Every night after work, I'd pull out my old laptop and teach myself. I watched videos on real estate, took free finance courses, listened to podcasts on how to grow money when you barely had any. I studied terms no one in my family ever used: equity, depreciation, leverage. I learned from strangers on the internet while my own family laughed behind my back. Tamara posted daily photos of fancy brunches and shopping bags. But I knew she was drowning in credit card debt. I saw it once when she opened her banking app at a family dinner and quickly hid the screen. Trevor made 6 figures in finance, sure, but he lived like he made 7. Every conversation he had started with, "When I close this next deal," but ended with him asking Grandma for a short-term loan that never got paid back. And Uncle Raymond? The loudest of them all? He hadn't paid off his house in 20 years. His money came and went like the wind. I once overheard him telling Mom he was thinking about selling one of his cars to cover taxes. She offered him tea. He said, "Tea won't fix a broke bank." But me? I was broke too, but building something small, slow, and solid. I stopped trying to keep up. I stopped trying to impress them. And I started focusing on learning the rules they never taught me. I learned that credit wasn't just about borrowing. It was a weapon if you used it wisely. I learned that you don't need a fancy degree to invest, just discipline and patience. I learned that passive income doesn't come overnight, but every dollar you plant can grow if you give it time. They kept laughing, I kept studying, they kept spending, I kept saving, they kept performing, I kept planning. I missed out on nights out. I said no to vacations. I wore the same pair of shoes until the soles thinned out. But every sacrifice was fuel. Every "you still renting" comment just pushed me harder. There were nights I cried, nights I felt like I was drowning, nights when I stared at my tiny fridge and wondered if this would ever be worth it. But I remembered Grandma's words. The ones who move in silence usually move the farthest. And so I kept moving. silently. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. Success isn't loud. Real success is quiet, steady, and always underestimated. Just like me. The first time I stepped into that broken-down building, it smelled like mildew, old dreams, and something burning in a microwave. The walls were cracked. The elevator creaked like it was sighing its last breath, and the hallway lights flickered like a haunted house. Most people would have turned right around, but I saw something different. I saw potential. It all started when I met Mr. Howard, an older gentleman in his late 70s who lived down the hall from me. He wore suspenders, walked slow, and always carried a thick leather notebook. He used to be a real estate broker back in the day, and one afternoon, we got to talking on the front steps during a power outage. "You remind me of me," he said, handing me that old notebook. "Just quieter." That notebook changed everything. It was filled with notes, formulas, advice, and lessons from decades of buying and selling property. I read it cover to cover like it was sacred. Mr. Howard became my mentor, teaching me how to look past the ugly, the broken, and the forgotten. "You don't make money buying pretty buildings," he'd say. "You make it fixing the ones everyone ignores." That's when I found the listing. A small 12-unit building in a rough part of town priced so low I thought it was a scam. But it wasn't. It was real. The owners were desperate to sell after years of mismanagement. I didn't have enough money. But I had a plan. I worked double shifts, drained what little savings I had, and secured a small loan through a community lender. I used every cent I'd earned and every bit of courage I had to buy it under a small LLC I named Rise Properties, my initials hidden in plain sight. Everyone thought I was insane. Mom was scared for me. My coworkers called it a dumpster dive. Even Mr. Howard raised a brow, though he smiled and said, "All right then, let's see what you do." It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. The pipes burst in week 2. The roof leaked during the first storm. Tenants were angry, the building manager quit, and I started doubting myself. I slept 3 hours a night and spent weekends scrubbing hallways with borrowed cleaning supplies. I learned to patch drywall on YouTube. I fixed what I could and hired help for what I couldn't. But slowly, it changed. I repainted every unit, repaired every window, added security cameras, upgraded the laundry room. I didn't flip it for profit. I made it livable, desirable. I treated the tenants with respect. Some were elderly, others single moms, a few just trying to survive like me. And they noticed. Soon, the building had a waiting list. Renters told their friends, and word spread. By the end of the year, I had a steady stream of income. Not flashy, but solid. And with that income, I bought another building. This one was slightly bigger, still rough around the edges. But I wasn't scared anymore. I had a system. I had confidence. And I had experience. Still, I kept quiet. No one in my family knew what I was doing. When they asked, I just said, "Still freelancing." They didn't ask for details. They never really did. At the next family dinner, Tamara asked me why I never bought a house. I shrugged. "It's not the right time." She scoffed. "What are you waiting for? Rent just keeps going up." I smiled, biting my tongue. I wanted to say, because I'd rather own the buildings people pay rent in. But I didn't. Not yet. It wasn't time. I kept my head down and kept working. By year 3, I had 5 properties under my name. Well, under Rise. No one connected it to me, that was the point. Let them think I was just floating by. Let them think I was lost. Because when you move in silence, you build a storm no one sees coming. And I was just getting started. It's funny how things come full circle. The building where most of my family lived wasn't always theirs. It belonged to Grandma Bernice's late husband, my grandpa. He bought it in the early 70s when the neighborhood was still growing. It had character, red brick walls, wrought iron balconies, and the kind of charm modern buildings just don't have anymore. Back then, it was a symbol of pride for the Miles family, a legacy. But time has a way of testing everything. After Grandpa passed, Grandma kept the building in her name, but she was getting older. Maintenance became a burden, and the place started falling apart. The plumbing was bad. The elevator broke constantly. Tenants complained. Rent wasn't even being collected properly. That's when Uncle Raymond stepped in. Of course he did. He convinced Grandma to let him handle it. Said he'd take care of the building, get the repairs done, manage the tenants, and lift the weight off her shoulders. Everyone clapped for him at the family brunch that week like he was some hero. But I watched closely. Months passed, and the building kept getting worse. Tenants moved out. The lobby smelled like mold. The stairwells were filthy. But Uncle Raymond just kept bragging about how he was keeping the family legacy alive. Meanwhile, he rented out the vacant units to shady short-term tenants and never fixed a thing. Grandma tried to speak up once at a dinner. "I'm worried about the building," she said gently. "I don't think it's being looked after." Raymond smiled wide and said, "Mama, don't stress. I got it all under control." But he didn't. Not even close. I started asking quiet questions. I spoke to tenants. I checked the city records. Uncle Raymond had failed to pay property taxes for 2 years. 2 years. He wasn't even collecting rent from half the units anymore. He had no idea how to manage a building. He just liked the image of it. The Miles name on a deed. That's what mattered to him, not the responsibility. One rainy afternoon, I visited Grandma. We sat in her living room drinking tea. Her fingers trembled as she held her cup. "Elena," she said barely above a whisper, "I'm scared they're going to lose it." I nodded slowly. "Would you trust me to take care of it?" She looked up at me with tired eyes, then gave the smallest smile. "You've always been the one who listens? Yes, I trust you." It took a few quiet months. I had to be careful. Uncle Raymond still believed he was in control, but legally, the building was still in Grandma's name. With her permission, and through E.M. Rise Properties, I made an offer. A generous one. One that would pay off the debt and provide Grandma with enough to live comfortably for the rest of her days. She signed the paperwork with tears in her eyes. The building was mine, and no one knew. Raymond didn't even notice the change in ownership. That's how little attention he actually paid. The name on the documents was a company name. He just kept showing up, talking loud, and pretending everything was fine. But I got to work. I paid off the taxes, cleaned up the place, repaired the pipes, replaced the mailboxes, and brought in a professional manager to help me keep it running smoothly. I met with every tenant one by one and listened to their complaints, something Raymond never did. Within months, the building looked new again. Tenants smiled when they passed me in the halls. And the best part? Half the family still lived there. Trevor and his wife rented one of the top-floor units. Tamara lived in a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor. Uncle Raymond stayed in a corner unit with a balcony view. They had no clue. Not a single one of them realized that the invisible girl they laughed at now signed their lease renewals. I never raised the rent. Not yet. Not because they deserved kindness, but because I had a plan. The long game. I wanted them to live comfortably. I wanted them to feel secure. I wanted them to believe they were still on top. The invitation came like it always did. Bold gold lettering on thick cream paper sealed with a red wax M for Miles. Uncle Raymond's annual family conference. An overly formal excuse for him to gather everyone, list his own achievements, and tear down anyone who didn't meet his standard of success. I almost threw it out. I hadn't gone the past 2 years. It was always the same. Me sitting quietly while they bragged, laughed, and looked down their noses at me like I was some broken project they'd all given up on. But this time, I had a reason to attend. I'd been patient. 3 years of building, buying, learning, staying silent. I let them laugh. I let them overlook me. I let them forget. But now, everything had changed. I had quietly bought 3 more properties after the family building. E.M. Rise Properties now owned over 30 units across the city. Each one was clean, stable, and profitable. I wasn't rich, not in the way they counted riches, but I was free. I had control. I had power. And no one saw it coming. That was the point. So I checked the box that said, attending, and wrote down my guest. Mom. She hadn't been to one of these in years either. The last time she did, Tamara made a nasty comment about her thrift store dress, and Trevor pretended not to see her. She left early, crying in the car. When I told her we were going, she hesitated. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "They always find a way to hurt you." I smiled. "Let them try." We arrived a little early. The event was held in one of those high-end restaurants Uncle Raymond liked to rent out to impress people. White linen tables, glimmering chandeliers, jazz music playing softly in the background. Staff in black suits passed around tiny glasses of things no one could pronounce. Tamara was already there, live streaming her outfit in the mirror wall. "It's giving classy but expensive," she said to her followers. She didn't even acknowledge us when we walked in. Trevor arrived next, wearing a navy suit and fake humility. I sat with Mom near the back, same as always. We watched as people filtered in, hugging loudly, boasting about their jobs, their kids, their new shoes. No one asked what I'd been up to. Perfect. Uncle Raymond eventually stood at the front, holding a microphone like he was hosting a TED Talk. "Welcome, family," he said, voice booming, "to the annual Miles Family Vision Conference." A round of applause, laughter, cameras flashed. He launched into his usual speech, a long rant about how some of us are builders, some of us are just watchers. His eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly on me. I didn't flinch. "Now, I want everyone to take a moment," he continued, "and think about where we're headed. Who's really making progress? Who's still figuring it out?" That was always his thing, indirect jabs dressed as wisdom. Tamara raised her hand proudly. "I just signed with a new brand deal," she announced, like it was a UN press conference. "Next year, I'm planning a luxury retreat in Bali for creators." Applause. Trevor chimed in. "I'm being considered for junior partner. If all goes well, I'll be managing hedge clients by Q4. More applause. Then Raymond turned to me. "And Elena," he said, smiling like a pastor about to offer prayer. "Still freelancing, I believe?" A few heads turned. Some snickers. Tamara whispered something to her friend and laughed behind her hand. I just smiled. "Yes, still doing my thing." He nodded. "Keep pushing, sweetheart. We all bloom at different times." My mother reached for my hand under the table. Her grip was tight. I knew she wanted to stand up for me, but I squeezed gently, letting her know it was okay. I didn't need defending. Not this time. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew that the wine they were sipping, the chairs they were sitting on, the elegant rooftop restaurant they were standing in, was located inside one of my buildings. I owned the property. The same building where half of them lived. Paid rent, slept at night. It was mine. And when the moment came, I'd remind them. But not yet. Let the music play. Let them talk. Because I wasn't just in the room anymore. I was in control of it. I waited. Waited through the endless bragging, the toasts, the fake hugs, the little digs. "Still driving that old car?" Tamara had asked me at the drink table earlier, raising her eyebrows like she was doing me a favor just by speaking to me. I smiled and nodded. No point explaining that I'd sold my car after buying 2 buildings and now took meetings from my home office. They wouldn't believe me anyway. Trevor had just wrapped up another speech about stocks and international clients, ending with a confident, "We should teach the younger ones how to multiply their income streams." Half the room nodded in admiration. Uncle Raymond gave him a proud pat on the back. Then came the toast. Uncle Raymond stood up again, this time with a glass of wine in hand, his belly pushing against his suit. "Before we wrap things up," he announced, "let's raise our glasses to the real estate winners in this family." He grinned wide. "To those who've invested wisely, and to those who, well, can't even afford a house." Everyone laughed. Hard. Even Trevor, who tried to cover his mouth with his fist. Tamara burst into giggles and said, "I mean, some people are still playing Monopoly while we're buying real land." All heads turned toward me. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I calmly picked up my glass, stood slowly, and looked around the table. I waited for the laughter to die down. And then, softly, I said, You're right. That made them pause. I could see the smug looks starting to settle into satisfaction. Maybe they thought I was finally admitting something. Owning my failure. Playing into their little family drama. I held their gaze and added, I don't own a house. A few chuckles. Tamara leaned in to whisper something again. But I wasn't done. I own a building, I continued. Actually, a few now. But the first one? The one I'm most proud of? I turned to Uncle Raymond. It's the one you all live in. Silence. Not a pause. Silence. You could hear the jazz music in the background. A waiter dropped a spoon, and even that sounded like an explosion. Tamara's jaw literally dropped. Trevor blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. Uncle Raymond stared, trying to piece together if I was joking or insane. I stayed standing. I bought it 2 years ago, I said. Legally, fairly, with Grandma's blessing through EM Rise Properties, my company. I pulled out a folder from my bag and laid it on the table. Here are the ownership documents. Your leases are in there too. Grandma's unit stays rent-free, of course. Still no one spoke. So I added, and if you're wondering, yes, the restaurant you're sitting in right now, this rooftop space, also part of that building. Mom looked at me with tears in her eyes, hand over her mouth. Raymond cleared his throat, finally trying to smile. You're joking? This is some kind of prank? No, I said simply. It's just a truth I kept to myself. You never asked what I was doing. You only assumed. Tamara finally found her voice. Wait, you? You own real estate? But how? You live in a rental. I nodded. Still do. Because I don't spend what I make to impress people who never cared. Trevor looked down, speechless. Raymond sat back in his chair like the wind had been knocked out of him. I took a slow sip of my drink and sat down. That was it. No drama, no mic drop. Just the truth. Quiet. Heavy. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I needed them to know. And judging by the silence in that room, they did. They didn't speak for a long time. The room stayed frozen, like time had stopped just long enough for everyone to realize the truth. The quiet girl they'd ignored, dismissed, and mocked, now held the keys to their lives. Literally. I sat calmly, watching the gears turn in their minds. Their faces shifted from shock to discomfort, from confusion to quiet fear. Uncle Raymond was the first to crack. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed, voice low. So what are you saying, Elena? That you're kicking us out now? You want to embarrass us? I tilted my head slightly. I didn't say that. But why now? Tamara blurted. Why say it like this? At a family event? I met her gaze. Because for years, you all made this space your stage, a place to flaunt, humiliate, and dismiss. I just figured it was time I shared my progress too. Trevor didn't say a word. He just stared at the folder like it might bite him. His wife gave him a little nudge under the table, but he didn't move. Then came Grandma Bernice's voice, soft but steady. She told me 2 years ago, she said. I gave her my blessing. All heads turned. She's the only one who asked me what I really wanted, the only one who listened. Her words settled like bricks. Tamara looked down. Raymond blinked rapidly. I saw shame in their eyes for the first time. I told her I didn't want my name on a property that was falling apart, Grandma went on, and I certainly didn't want it in the hands of someone who only cared about bragging rights. Raymond flinched like he'd been slapped. I stood again, this time not to make a statement, but to leave. Before I did, I looked around the table and said, Nothing changes, not unless it has to. Grandma lives rent-free. Everyone else keeps their leases. For now. For now? Trevor repeated, finally finding his voice. I nodded. You'll get renewal notices in the next few months. Updated terms. Improvements are expensive. He didn't argue. He couldn't. I picked up my folder, turned to Mom, and reached out my hand. She stood slowly, still holding back tears. I squeezed her fingers gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," I said. "Thank you. For never letting me forget who I was, even when they tried to tell me I was nothing." We walked out together. As I passed the table, Tamara tried to smile. "You know, Elena, maybe we could collab sometime? I could promote your brand on my page." I smiled without stopping. Maybe. She didn't know I would never need her promo. The night air was cool, quiet, freeing. We got into the car, a modest one I still drove by choice, and for the first time in years, I felt taller, lighter, seen. Back at my apartment, Mom sat on my couch and looked around. "You really built all this by yourself?" I nodded, one piece at a time. She looked proud in a way I hadn't seen before, not just proud of what I'd done, but proud that I never became like them. Loud, fake, hollow. A week later, renewal notices were sent. Some rents stayed the same. Some adjusted slightly to match market value. Nothing unfair. But the message was clear. The invisible girl was now the one writing the terms. No one challenged it. They couldn't. At the next family event, I didn't need to speak. When I entered the room, people stood, offered me drinks, asked questions, listened. I wasn't invisible anymore. But not because I demanded attention, because I earned respect. I built something real, quietly, carefully, with no applause, no validation, just vision and grit. They used to say I couldn't even afford a house. And now? They live in mine. They said she couldn't even afford a house. Now they pay rent to her. If that plot twist hit you hard like this video, comment, "Who's laughing now?" if you made it to the end, and subscribe for more stories where the quiet ones make the loudest impact. Your support keeps these stories alive. See you in the next one.